Hello again, A Boy in His Bible. We talked about, in my last talk, on the church and elements that you could understand. And one of them I mentioned was giving of the New Testament to needs up to 1,000 miles away. And my editor, Matt, said to me he'd heard somewhere that the money in the Western church stays in the Western church, only a few percent. He wasn't sure if it's 1% or 10%. I suspect it's nearer 1% myself. We do spend too much money on ourselves in our churches. And we're wise if we begin to change that in our own generosity to people in need elsewhere, which could be planting churches elsewhere, which a lot of churches do. When we talk about the church, however, there are some things I want to mention to you about the church that you might find useful. And I call this the main descriptions of the church. Of these, I've selected, I think, 6. However, there could have been 60. I've just selected what came to my mind and put them down and wrote them down. Maybe I did 10 or 12, and that was my previous lovely pastor. Richard Buse may well have changed them somewhat, but I do even now recognize them as things that I saw in the Bible as a young person. The first thing is, and I need to explain this, it's a firm building. There's living stones put together, and it's a building for God. And the image of the firm building was twofold. The one was the idea of the temple, now redundant, now destroyed, now gone, and the tabernacle that was there in the wilderness. And Jesus is the new covenant. He's both the ark and he's the content of the ark, and he's the mercy seat of the ark. He's the new that we have. And therefore the idea of the temple, both for the individual Christian and for the church, as a building. It was a building that even Abraham looked for, building made by God, a God building. But the God building is not made with normal bricks and mortar. It's not your physical building that you go to. That's a convenience. That's called a church. But it's not a church that we have in the New Testament sense of the word. It's when the people come together, they're a building. Now, I said there's 2 things in the New Testament that comes over when it's called a building. Somewhere later in the writings of the New Testament, it's called a home or a house. The house that Jesus built, as you find in Hebrews. Moses built a house, but it wasn't with his material. Jesus has built his house with his material. And we're a house. The church is the house. So we're both a temple, so there can be praise and adoration, learning and discovering. But there's that sense of fellowship that you get in a home. And we're the living home for God. God can live within a fellowship. And you have to define that fellowship. That can be a little bit harder. I often say maybe the home groups, of which there are hundreds of thousands throughout the world, maybe that is the place where you develop the homeness of the being a home for God. Maybe when you get the large congregation, that's more the temple. I don't know. You can think that one out for yourself. But it's a strong building, but not made with bricks, not made with hands. The Word of God is very clear that if we don't build correctly, any building made with hands will just be that. It'll just be a building. You can call it a church, but it'll just be a building. You can turn the building into something wonderful. Of course it is. It's convenient. And it can become something majestic in the Orthodox churches that I've had the privilege of talking in the States. There were 5 of them. And in each case of these Orthodox churches, on the outside, they didn't look anything at all. But inside were just full of colour and brightness. That was their tradition. And I entered into it, and thank God for it. They had icons that I didn't believe in. But if you said that the people felt they were in the presence of God, they did feel in the presence of God. They were trying to create heaven on earth when they got together. Of course, they're not the church of the people, but they were using the church for them in their way to help them in their Christian life. I do not condemn them. That's what I'm saying. It's also a virgin bride. The church is pure. There are those in the church who've committed adultery. There are those in the church who've had mistresses for the time. There are those in the church who've deserted families and come back again, and maybe not to that family, it's too broken, and started again. There are those in the church who once were prostitutes. There were those in the church who were thieves and robbers. There was those in the church who cared for themselves and nobody else. There's those in the church who at one time built bigger barns and said, once I've got all my barns filled, I can go on holiday for the rest of my life. And they've been converted to Jesus Christ, and they belong to a virgin bride. Doesn't that thrill you? Doesn't that excite you? That no matter who you are, what you are, where you are, how you were, you're now part of the virgin bride of Christ. That picture of the way Jesus loves his church is the one that's given to every husband in relation to his wife and his family. Then it is a body that functions. You may know the stories of how the eye and the ear and the arm and the leg, etc., have to work. It has to function in harmony. I have seen more churches split over secondary issues than anything else in my life. And I've seen many churches split over secondary issues. I remember sitting in a meeting when I was a young man, I think I was 17, where the church was debating of its new painting inside. And there was this lovely old man who was persuaded that God had told them to tell them that they should paint it in the colours of the Ark of the Covenant. That split the church. Couldn't decide on the painting. Didn't split 50-50, but so many people have left. I've known more people leave through what I call non-essentials, secondary issues, as so often is called, impractical things. Pride and envy, want my way, all came into it. I wouldn't worry if a person wanted to paint their church multicolour or black. I wouldn't argue for that. I would, of course, argue that we should be having a place, if people are going to be in, they have comfortable seats and it's not looking like a dungeon. Of course I would. But I wouldn't leave a church because my vote was not worthy to be counted. It's a functioning body, not a separated body, not a divided body. It's also called, in the Bible, a permanent city. The cities, when that was written, and the cities of the Old Testament, tended to be large villages, or maybe a small town. And they would build a wall round it. By building a wall round a city, a building, that could be called a city in those days. Why did they build a wall? Because they knew an enemy might destroy them. In other words, their city might not be permanent. I had an invitation with some friends to visit the Holy Land by the tourist board in Israel. It was a special invitation, and I really did appreciate it, and a big thank you to them. And I was amazed that in the week that we were there, day after day after day, there were ruins. Not permanent. Those who've been to Rome have seen various buildings, not permanent. Those who travelled around the Middle East have seen buildings, not permanent. In England, we've had big buildings for churches and they've been pulled down, they're not permanent. I sometimes see a church and I used to say to myself, that will turn into a bingo hall soon. And when we did have bingo halls, that was a certain game that people used to play. That was happened. I was at a place recently, there was this lovely church and I realised it wasn't a church, it was a supermarket for one of our supermarket people. They didn't have permanent cities or permanent buildings or permanent towns or villages. Everything to do with this world is not permanent. But Jesus said, this city is a permanent city. It's a place of operations, a place where things are done, a place where things are manufactured, engineered, a place where art and science and music and drama can flow. And it's permanent. There is a beauty and a goodness that belongs to this city, that marks it out. That's called the church. Not your building. It's you. You. I'm a businessman, so I've been able to give my business abilities to the church. You're a cook, you can give your cooking to the church. Some of you, and some of the ladies who I've met were housekeepers. I was thinking recently of the Fletchers and the Ainsleys, and they opened their homes. The one was a man in his 40s coming into his 50s, and the other was a young man married with little children. And I was 17 or 18, and they opened their homes to the people within the church. Oh, what an amazing gift. They became a city to me. A small city, but a city. A city where people can move and grow and develop. We're a city of activity. A city with no walls. When you see the New Jerusalem, it has doors that are always open. The open doors, no closed doors. Two other things in this second talk. It's a stable family and it's an active army. It's a stable family at home, but it will attack evil wherever it sees it. It will say no to the cruelty to children. It will have a moral voice that is loud and clear, that is there. And as a family, it shows the true unity. Today, we have far too many people getting divorced in the Christian church. Now, let me be very, very clear. And we will come up one day to talk about divorce. But let me just be clear. I'm not a person who's going to condemn anybody for the breakup of their marriage. But when I was a young boy, I didn't hear of people getting divorced in the church. I heard of them getting divorced in the world. But in the church is a family. It's a home. And it's stable. Now, I did learn some things. I learned very quickly that some churches sold their denomination to the children, and the children rejected the denomination, and with it rejected Christianity. That's a lesson for church leaders. That's a lesson that when we talk about being active and as an army, that our meetings should be active and more than one or two people should be used in the things that go on. Of course, some churches have a choir and they have to learn their pieces in the week. Again, I refer to my dear friend, now in glory, Richard Hughes. He said to me, the reason why we have so many people who are good readers in reading the scriptures, different people every week, is we have a guild of readers. And they practice with each other how to read the scriptures in public. And with the prayers as well. We have people who do the praying, reading and praying. I think I hinted to him that maybe we needed a guild a club for people to give their testimonies. I don't know. It would have been like me to have said that. We are an active army. So the main descriptions is a firm building, a virgin bride, a functioning body, a permanent city, a stable family, and an active army. That is what we mean by being church. In the next talk, we're going to be talking about the relationship of the church to Christ himself. And I hope you'll find that interesting and will come and listen. In the meantime, this is the boy in his Bible saying goodbye and thank you.